This is a bit troublesome, this cursed space is likely to reach the level of danger of A grade. Without this kid, we may not be able to explain it here. Boss, you said that there is such a ruin under the D33 wasteland that even the hunting guild hasn't recorded. This broken manor is actually a rare cursed space. Who the is this kid? Why is he here? It is certainly not easy to let the big people in the inner city exile him, but also to offer a reward to completely kill him. The identity is definitely not simple. It's a pity that I wanted to ask this kid what secrets before killing, and I followed him for so long. Unexpectedly, I got into trouble. Hey! I don't seem to be dead yet. Who? Oh! His chest was undulating violently, as if awakened from a nightmare of drowning. Solon suddenly opened his eyes. He was panting heavily, and the strong sense of suffocation gradually disappeared. His eyes gradually focused. This is an unfamiliar room. Where is this? Solon wanted to struggle to get up, but lowered his head to find that he was firmly tied to a wooden chair, unable to move. A strong smell of blood came from his breath, and when I looked at my situation, it was terrible. There are many blood stains on the white linen shirt, and there are open wounds. What's more terrifying is that the palms of his hands were nailed to the handle of the chair by a sharp dagger, and the scarlet blood was gurgling out. The intense tingling from the struggle pierced his nerves like a tide. I was kidnapped. It was too late to think about why he would see this scene after waking up, and Solon's gaze caught the two bad-faced guys in the room. A smoky make-up bald man with purple lips and dark circles, and another thin green-haired coxcomb with nose ring and earrings. Their black leather jackets and old leather trousers are full of nails. From the look of their outfits, they look like two punk fanatics. Of course, the most striking thing is the weapon they wear. The gun. Is it a gangster? Solon's heart is slightly tilted. The two guys have large revolvers on their waist holsters, and there are simple and mysterious inscriptions on the guns. But what made him even more strange was that on the right arm of the bald man was a strange, mechanical arm. This mechanical arm carries a strong dark industrial wind, and almost all its parts are exposed in the air. The white paint spray on the shoulders has been blurred, with the words DH031 written on it. Brass gears, power transmission bearings, mechanical joints, air valves with dashboards, high-pressure pipes, the joints are still covered with dark lubricating oil. There is also a fist-sized spiral muzzle and cross sight at the front end of the robotic arm. It seems that this robotic arm is still a handheld individual artillery. Of course, these metal parts are also inscribed with some complicated runes. What makes Solon the most incomprehensible is the white steam on the exhaust pipe of the robotic arm, which seems to be a power unit. This is a steam-powered machine. Solon frowned slightly, thinking that he saw something incredible. In this era, there are still people playing antiques such as steam machinery. There is not much panic, but more doubts in his eyes. Filming? No. The sharp pain from the palm of his hand tells Solon that he has indeed been kidnapped. I remember I clicked a strange email before, and my eyes went dark. Then, did you wake up here? Solon, who woke up in a strange place, didn't clear his mind at all. No matter how hard he tried to recall, there was no memory of the process of being kidnapped in his mind. Solon felt that nothing was right. He wanted to find more clues. His eyes fell back into the room. Bright crystal chandeliers, exquisitely carved solid wood furniture, various gilded metal handles. The bookshelves are neatly arranged with rows of gilded books, and there is a black and white family portrait on the wall. The details are full of aristocratic style. It looks like a study room. It can be inferred from this that the area of the house is not small. The retro style of the decoration is very detailed. The homeowner should be a very particular British retro style lover, or this is originally a European castle. But in short, very rich. Solon quickly had speculations in his heart. You are so rich, why kidnap yourself? The piercing pain from the two sharp daggers nailed to both hands always reminded him that these two guys were absolutely vicious kidnappers. These two guys, what are you going to do to tie me? Solun's pupils focused, and once again fell on the two people in the room. Whether it's their European faces, or the retro equipment on their bodies, or the steam robot arms, everything seems strange. Of course, what is even more strange is that Solun raised his head and saw his shadow from the shiny mirror-like ceiling of the roofed appearance of a handsome, brown-haired boy even with a blood-stained face. Fuck, how did I become a foreigner? Solun vaguely guessed that something strange seems to have happened to him. Moreover, when he woke up just now and opened his eyes, he also found some strange words on the retina. Blinked to confirm that it was not an illusion. His thoughts flashed for a moment, and at this moment a vicious burst of shouts pulled Solun's thoughts back to reality. Hey! Boy, I know you're awake, don't pretend to be a fool. The skinny man with the comb head stared at him fiercely, and then shouted, finally, I'll give you another chance. Tell me honestly how you know this ruin, why are you here, otherwise? While was speaking, this guy grabbed the handle of the dagger that had pierced Surin's left hand, twisting it with full warning. The biting pain of ground meat went straight to his forehead, and Solun's forehead was instantly covered with cold sweat, and he took a breath. He immediately understood that these two guys were interrogating and seemed to want to know something from their mouths. Interrogation? Intelligence? The text on the retina. At this moment, a flash of inspiration flashed, and the clues in the brain were connected in series. These guys are not trying to tie me, but the kidnapped owner. Solun suddenly woke up, and probably guessed his situation. And at this time, a bold thought popped up in his heart, I seem to be crossing. Although this idea is outrageous, it is also the most reasonable explanation. Whether he is a blonde boy, or the two punk-style kidnappers in front of him, or the conversation he understands but doesn't know what language it is, it proves that this is no longer the original world. As a senior fan of online literature, crossing is not difficult to accept. After a moment of shock, Solun became more calm. Crossing is about to GG, UU reading www. What kind of start is UUGonshu.com? Last chance? Haha. The original owner has been killed by these two guys once, and Solun didn't have any luck. The two kidnappers in front of him could even use crippling methods for interrogation. He had no doubt that when they got the information they wanted, they would kill himself like a cockroach. He looked at the joking expressions of the two of them, his eyes gradually became gloomy, and he said to himself, are you going to kill again? Solun knew in his heart that these two guys had been murderous in the morning. Is like playing an immersive horror game. At the beginning of the game, he felt the tension of the adrenal glands soaring. Die? Haha, many years ago, I had the consciousness to face death directly. Because of some special childhood experiences, he lacked some dangerous personality management ability. At this moment, facing the threat of death, Solun's body tightened due to the sting completely relaxed, as if the negative emotions of fear and panic did not exist at all. Whether it's crossing or not, no matter what the current interrogation situation is. Solun knew very well that if he wanted to live, there was only one choice. He can't avoid these two kidnappers. And these two kidnappers have real death threats to him. With the thoughts, a certain suppressed thought in my heart became more and more uncontrollable, and Solun's eyes gradually became violent. So, it can only be, you go to die. In the next instant, the corners of his mouth raised a frantic arc, and there was no more fear of death on his face. On the contrary, I was faintly excited. As if, a different personality. The coxcomb man stepped on the chair tied to Solun with one foot, and shouted fiercely, hey, boy, I have very limited patience. The two were very close, and this guy didn't seem to regard the injured prey as a threat at all, and was unprepared. Solun was tied to a chair, palms of both hands were nailed by daggers, and he looked immobile. But others didn't notice that, because of the painful struggle before, the rope tied to Solun's arm had loosened, leaving a gap enough for him to withdraw his hand. "Boy, you talk." The coxcomb man slapped Solun's face with a slap. With a pop, Solun's mouth overflowed with blood. But he was beaten, but he didn't see the slightest anger on his face, but a strange grin and fierceness appeared in the corner of his eyes. In his eyes, the demon that had been suppressed for a long time finally escaped. "Hey hey!" There was a sneer in his heart. At this moment, without any hesitation at all, Solun withdrew his right hand abruptly. The dagger nailed to the right hand just penetrated the gap between the metacarpal bones between the and the ring finger. With this twitch, the tear sound that made the hair stand upright, and the soft tissue was cut. The sharp dagger directly cut the flesh between the metacarpal bones, and the blood arrow shot out. This move, looked at the coxcomb man who stayed aside. This guy looked at the blood shot on his trouser legs, his eyes widened in an instant, as if he was still in shock and didn't come back to his senses. But his eyes realized what was going on. In order to get rid of the sting of the dagger, this kid forcibly broke his palm? In the next instant, the coxcomb man immediately realized the danger and shouted in his heart, "No! But, it's too late." Smiling Solun didn't care about the tingling in the palm of his hand. When he got out of trouble with one hand, he would never give the enemy any chance to react. Stretched his hand forward, he quickly grabbed the silver revolver pinned to the holster on the waist of Coxcomb with a thunderous force, and then aimed at this guy's chest without hesitation and pulled the trigger. Boom! Boom! 2 successive thunder-like gunshots resounded throughout the room. The bullet pierced through the chest of the coxcomb head, and then Poo-Poo burst 2 fist-sized blood holes in the back, killing him instantly. The warm blood spurted on Solun's face, adding a bit hideously. The power of the silver revolver was unexpectedly great, and Solun also fell backward because of the huge recoil along with the chair. Listening to the gunshots, the bald-headed man with smoky makeup on the opposite side was also shocked for a moment by the sudden change. The kid who was holding hands before, actually has such a cruel side? Looking at the 2 blood holes pierced in the back of his companion, the bald head realized that the prey trapped in the trap by the hunter before suddenly became a bloodthirsty wolf. Damn it! The bald head shouted in his heart, and his reaction was not slow. Seeing Solun's muzzle pointed towards himself again, he instinctively raised the steam manipulator on his right arm, and pulled the trigger with the muzzle toward the front. There was a loud bang, and the whole study trembled. The muzzle did not emit the flames of gunpowder burning, but high-pressure gas bombs. Not far away, Solun seemed to have foreseen the blow, and skillfully reversed the angle of the fall, just to avoid the deadly aim of the gun. The sound of breaking wind disappeared for a moment, and the high-pressure gas bomb pierced the corner of Surin's chair quickly, and then clicked through the ground, leaving a black hole the size of a bowl on the wooden floor, and disappeared. Rao avoided a shot from the front, and the airflow of the high-pressure gas bomb was still inserted through the body. When the chair leg was crushed, the air wave along with the rope and a piece of flesh on Solun's leg were also rubbed to shreds. Like countless sharp wind blades twisted, the wound was burning and stinging fiercely. However, Solun didn't show any pain on his face, instead there was a bloodthirsty excitement. The moment the chair fell to the ground, he moved again. It took only half a minute for Solun to decide to do it since he woke up. Although he seemed rushed, he was already very mature in thinking about it. Before he started, he had predicted the current shelling. The small movements of the bald head unconsciously moved the mechanical arm, so Solun also found that those steam mechanical arm joints with rough bearings and gear transmission were not too flexible. Aiming at the reaction time, there is a high probability that it will be much slower than the human nerve response. And Solun could predict that he killed the comb head himself, and under the threat of gunpoint, the bald man would definitely fight back immediately. Then the aiming direction of the muzzle trajectory must be the original position of the chair, and it is predicted that the chance of dodge is not small. And if the bald head spends too much time aiming precisely, then this time is enough for Surin to shoot another shot. Whoever dies, who lives is 5050. So, there is a risk, but it is worth a bet. This is the only chance to get out. This is also the most important reason why Solun decided to kill someone decisively, even with the palm of his hand just now. The thoughts flew in his mind, and the reality was no more than a moment. As Solun expected, the bald head hurriedly fired back the cannon, but it missed. The jet pierced the floor, and there was no expected bomb explosion. Solun narrowed his eyes, flashing a dangerous cold light. It's now. He instantly adjusted the defensive posture of curled up, and at the moment he fell to the ground raised the silver revolver, decisively raised his hand and pulled the trigger again towards the bald man. Boom! A familiar gunshot sounded, as if the space was frozen. The bullet came out through the hall, the trajectory left a long trajectory in the air, and then it hit the bald eye accurately. The faint blue fire from the muzzle illuminates a frightened face. The bald head has no time to do anything. The bullet has already hit his right eye socket. It's done. Solun licked his lips, seemingly satisfied with the shot. Is not like the previous chance to kill Coxcomb at close range and fire 2 shots in a row. After you read the shot at www.yuyuganshu.com, the huge recoil shocked the muzzle so that the muzzle rose sharply. Even if he fired another shot, it was impossible to hit the bald head again. Besides, the wound on the palm was also torn apart by the recoil of the gunshot, and the painful finger flexors trembled, almost unable to hold the pistol. However, it is enough. Solun was sure that he could hit 100% with this shot, enough to get that guy headshot. But Solun never expected that it was just this 10 and 9 shot, but there was an accident. How is this possible? Solun's pupils shrank suddenly, and he looked at the scene before him in disbelief. The bullet aimed at the bald man's eye sockets. The guy's crisis response was not weak. At the moment when the gun was flaring, he instinctively tried to avoid it. Tilted his head slightly, the bullet hit his brow. Normally, the power of this large caliber revolver, as long as it hits the head, no matter where it is, it will definitely crack like a watermelon. Is right in front of my eyes, no. Seeing the bizarre scene before him, Solun was stunned. He watched the bullet hit the bald forehead, then, embedded in the skull? What's the matter? How could his skull be so hard? At this moment, Solun immediately realized that he might have come to a weird world beyond imagination. Steam robotic arms, undead humans with musket headshots. After a moment of shock, Solun's eyes became clear, and the violence and craziness in his eyes disappeared. And at this time, the bald head that was almost intact with a shot in the head on the opposite side, also looked at him sullenly. I didn't get it out after putting him out, the situation is a bit bad now. Solun greeted the murderous look in the bald-headed Zhuang's eyes, and gave a wry smile in his heart. Take a gun and kill the coxcomb head, then work hard to find a chance to shoot the bald head. The plan has been well thought out. And luck was very partial to him, everything proceeded according to plan, even the shelling did not cause much damage to him. Unfortunately, this shot did not kill the bald head in the end. After all, normal people would never think that the enemy will possess the superior ability that can resist bullets physically. After shot, Solun also completely lost the opportunity to shoot. The brawny bald man deducted the bullet inlaid on his forehead with his fingers, and a sardonic smile appeared on his face. He did not fire the high-pressure spray gun on the robotic arm again, but stomped his feet, a wave of air exploded, and his figure had disappeared in place. After a certain amount of eyes, the bald head has already rushed several meters like a ghost and appeared in front of Solun. The iron tongs grabbed Solun's neck with his big hands. With the strange force of the collision, the bald head and the mahogany chair that were tied together were hit hard against the wall by the bald head. Wow! There was a crisp sound. The wooden chair fell apart, and the shattered sawdust fell like rain. Solun didn't have time to react at all. He just felt like he had been hit by an elephant, and his eyes went dark. He couldn't hold back a fishy throat, and with a pouch, a mouthful of muddy blood mixed with internal organs spurted out. The silver revolver in his hand also fell to the ground, and he lost the only weapon he could resist. And now, the gun seems to be useless. The speed of the bald head was a little ridiculously fast. Is another ability that surpasses ordinary humans. However, this did not surprise Solun anymore. You can't die with a headshot, and it's no surprise that it's faster. The bald head stared fiercely at Solun, whose feet were hung in the air, and gritted his teeth and said, "Boy, I didn't expect it, my talent for awakening is C079 steeled bones. If it weren't for this ability, I'm afraid I would really want it today." "It's in your hands," said. His bald head glanced at the companion's corpse in a pool of blood on the ground, his eyes getting colder and colder. "Thinking back to the tricky shot just now, I have a lingering fear. If he hadn't evaded the vital point, I'm afraid he himself would now be a corpse on the ground." Bald head exerted force in his hands, trying to pinch the boy in front of him. "I don't know what I thought of," and he hesitated for a moment. Solun said silently in his heart, "Talent, toughened bones? Extraordinary ability." Then he closed his eyelids weakly. The bald mechanical arm clasped the neck firmly like iron tongs, and the strong sense of suffocation made people no doubt that the guy could easily twist the neck. But he was not killed for the first time, but Solun felt no panic in his heart. Because he saw the hesitation of the bald head. He knew very well that this guy didn't kill himself immediately, and 80% still coveted the original owner's secret. But at this time, the patience of this bald head has probably been exhausted because of the death of his companion. Solun understood that if he verbose a word more at this moment, this guy might kill himself angrily. So, he exhaled the last breath in his chest and uttered 5 words with difficulty, "I have a treasure map." As expected. As soon as he said this, the murderous intent was so bitter, but Solun also obviously felt that the suffocation was instantly weakened. The iron hand pinched around his neck quietly loosened the space where he could breathe. "Ah!" sneered with disdain. The brawny bald man was not as stupid as he seemed. He also knew that Solun wanted to take the opportunity to survive. But he still gave the opportunity and said coldly, "Boy, you only have one chance to tell me the information that interests Lao Tzu, and I will make you die happy." As soon as the voice fell, the iron tongs grabbed it hard with big hands, and a clear bone crack sounded. Solun's painful eyebrows twitched, as if very weak, and squinted his eyes slightly, actually quickly reading the information on the retina. "Did you just die happily?" He didn't care about this sentence at all, and said directly, "The 7th door on the left of the main corridor of the Manor Banquet Hall, there is a hidden door inside. The lampstand on the wall is the mechanism, leading to the underground, and there is a maze." These words are not made up casually, but information obtained from the retina. In such a short time, in a completely unfamiliar world, trying to make up an impeccable lie is easy to see through. And see through the ending, there is only a dead end. Although I don't know what this means to keep the information on the retina, as long as he closes his eyes, Solun can also see the message. The content is as follows: "My dear Fick, when you read this message, your memory should have been erased. Although the fate is cruel, but, the matter has ended. As for the truth of the matter, it is for you now say, it's not important anymore. I know that maybe you will be reconciled, so I left something for you, which can be regarded as compensation for you. If destiny does not abandon you, and you will have enough power to explore the truth in the future, naturally, you can come into contact with the truth of being exiled. If you can't, living in the dark may be a good thing for you. Remember, don't trust anyone, especially those on the upper levels of the Black Tower." The information on the retina, apart from this passage, is followed by some obscure texts that are too late to read, seeming to explain some kind of magical power called alchemy in this world. Then there is that very strange road map. Is not a plan view, but a three-dimensional, zigzag fluorescent line, marked from top to bottom. It's like a mine or an abyss cave. Solun glanced around, and probably understood the cause of the matter. S predecessor's name is Fick, and it seems to have been banished for some reason. However, these have nothing to do with him as a traverser. There is no memory anyway, and he has no interest in the original owner's past. Solun cares more about the current situation. Judging from the name, a relative of the original owner left these words on his retina. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. It is also because of this information that the original owner came to this manor to find ancient ruins marked on the map. I didn't come to take a closer look. It was probably related to the inheritance of the bald head. The magical supernatural talent like the head is hard to resist bullets. Solun selectively said some intelligence, while ignoring some key points. For example, he didn't mention the details of the maze. Also, there are many lampstands in the room. Only the correct one can open the underground passage. Others will trigger the mechanism. If you want to survive from this murderous bald man, you have to show value. If you want to continue to live, you can't explain your value all at once. As long as the enemy is not stupid, he will definitely not be killed now. As expected. Hearing this, a strange color flashed through the bald eyes. He had long guessed that the kid in front of him who was offered a reward for assassination by the inner city man had a secret. However, after the death of a brother, the bald head became more cautious. He asked, "What treasures are hidden in this manor?" Solun pretended to weakly close his eyes, looked at the text on the retina, and said, "It is said, that there are relics left by Sir Isaac." Just after the words fell, the bald head seemed to have heard something incredible. His expression suddenly changed. "What?" The tone was suddenly heavy, and Solun raised his eyes and glanced. "Although I don't know what that Sir Isaac means, looking at the bald face, I know what might be an incredible treasure. But this is good news for Solun. Now he is more sure, he can't die for the time being." Solun's words stirred up stormy seas in the bald head. He immediately asked, "Is there really a relic left by Sir Isaac in this manor?" Solun spat another mouthful of blood in great detail before responding, "Yes. At least this is recorded on the treasure map I got." Hearing the reconfirmation, the bald-headed man's eyes turned frequently, as if thinking about something. Excitement, anticipation, entanglement, and a few worries. He looked at Solun, his eyes flashed suspiciously, but the killing intent was really suppressed. "If you don't know the secret of this manor, you kill it." But now that he knew there was such a big treasure in this manor, how could he just give up? As the senior famine hunter leader in the city of Old Ringtown, how did he not know the value of Sir Isaac's relic? The legendary great alchemist who has studied ancient alchemy to the extreme, and is known as the half-god. He has researched countless new alchemy styles, countless peculiar medicines, and countless invention patents throughout his life. Each of his alchemy manuscripts can be sold at sky-high prices in the Lingdun black market. The bald head has seen it with his own eyes. At an auction in the inner city, someone bought a page of useless life notes for the sky-high price of 300 gold crowns, just because it was a relic of Sir Isaac's handwritten notes. You have to know that the DH031 modified version manipulator he is equipped with is only worth tens of gold crowns with the addition of the material and the modification fee. Although Bald knows that Solun may have something to hide, as long as that person is involved, it is worth his life to gamble. If you really find something left by Sir Isaac, you will definitely get rich overnight, and you will need your life to hunt for waste in the second half of your life. Thinking of this, his bald head squinted and asked coldly, "Boy, who are you?" "I do not know either." Solun thought blankly for a moment, and added, "My memory is erased." The message on the retina said that the original owner was amnesticized, so there is nothing wrong with the answer. Hearing this, his bald head groaned for a moment. Didn't seem to doubt, and didn't ask any more questions. was exiled from the inner city, and was assassinated by a reward. His identity is definitely not simple, and the explanation of amnestics is also in the past. He didn't go into the question of Solun's identity anymore, but instead asked, "Why did the treasure map you mentioned come from?" Solun replied, "I don't know who left it to me." After a pause, he added, "I saw it by chance in an old book, and then I burned it." His bald head frowned, and he didn't speak. They had searched their bodies before the interrogation, and they did not find anything that might be a treasure map. Therefore, people cannot be killed anymore. He also guessed that Solun must have reservations. Life-saving things will never be stupid enough to explain them all at once. The big iron tongs on his neck let go, and Solun knew that he had saved his life temporarily. Although he looked a little embarrassed, he was always calm in his heart. If you want to really live, you have to think of other ways. The bald head was obviously on his guard too, and kept asking for the details of the treasure map. But at this moment, suddenly a cry of despair came from outside the door. "Head, where are you, Head? Help!" The sudden wailing made the atmosphere in the room suddenly become weird. When he heard the bald head, his expression immediately became very solemn. Only then did he realize that he is still in a cursed space that is suspected of being A-grade dangerous. There are unknown dangers in this manner. Solun didn't know what terrible things the guy outside experienced, but listening to the desperate tone, he also guessed that something terrible happened outside the door. Bald Head frowned and frowned, pinching Solun's neck with one hand as a shield, walked over and opened the door. Kaka, the door opened. At this time, a guy covered in blood rushed in with a panic face. The bald head obviously knew the guy dressed as an assassin in leather, and frowned and said his name, Marcus. The guy looked at his bald head, his pale face suddenly became ruddy, and he said in ecstasy, "Head Ivan." After a pause, the horror on his face turned into a rejoicing for the rest of his life, and he gasped and said, "Oh, my God! Commander, I finally found you." Solun watched this scene silently, and then he knew the names of the two. Leader? What kind of organization it sounds like? Solun looked at the wound and blood on the man named Marcus, then looked at the musket with the blue smoke in the man's hand, and felt a little strange. A sharp weapon cuts and lacerates. The man who used the gun was actually used by someone. Is the knife scratched? Maybe, not human? Obviously, things don't seem to be simple. At this time, the bald head looked at Marcus alone, and then looked outside the door, but found nothing unusual. After closing the door, he asked solemnly, "Where is the Mark deputy team, where is Daniel, and where else?" "The captain, they are dead, they are all dead." Marcus was full of horror, as if recalling something, and cried, Just now we entered this cursed space, and we got lost as we walked. Then we found that there are so many horror dolls in this house. There seems to be a ghost species weird manipulating those dolls in the house. It seems to be everywhere, and it wants us to play games with them. Peekaboo, you will be killed if you find it. Ghost species. After listening to the stuttering narration of his subordinates, the bald Ivan's face was full of solemnity. Ghost species? Weird? Solun caught a few words that he understood but were beyond his original knowledge. However, after seeing the extraordinary abilities of this world, he can easily understand that this term should refer to some kind of superior creature. It just killed more than 10 members of this bald head. Before crossing, Solun was an upmaster of horror games and supernatural movie commentary. So although the story told by the guy named Marcus just now was bizarre, it wasn't too weird to him. He didn't have much horror in his heart, instead he felt an inexplicable familiar feeling. Horror plot? This seems to be the right way to unfold. Vaguely, he can also infer some of the hobbies of that ghost species from the process, such as, like to abuse and kill humans, like naive play games. Now it seems that the fatal threat is not only the bald head, but also a ghost species. The bald head was still inquiring about the situation of his subordinates carefully, and at this time, Solun, who was thinking about suddenly discovered something, raised his brow. What? His gaze moved away from Marcus, and suddenly fell on the red, black, and green soldier figure that looked like a nutcracker in the corner of the study. Before, he thought it was a pure decoration in the study. I don't know if it's an illusion. Solun just saw the doll's eyes trembling. At this time, the dark eyeballs on the doll's face happened to be staring at the three people in the room. After thinking about it for a while, Solun found an abnormality, and said in his heart, I thought it was a mistake in memory, but it turned out to be really moving. He remembered very clearly that when he was bald-headed against the opposite wall, the puppet's eyes were to the left, just staring at them. And now, their position has moved to the door to the right, and the doll's eyes are still staring at them. Looks like this underscore. Therefore, the position of the person moved, but the doll did not move, but the direction of its eyeballs also moved. This is a habit he used to develop in playing horror secret room games. In a claustrophobic environment, the eyes will always instinctively collect all the clues around to break the game. Then I noticed the difference in the Nutcracker doll. It turned out to be monitored by people. Solun noticed the anomaly, but there was a sudden flash in his eyes. Originally thought he had read it wrong, but now he heard that there was a murderous puppet in the house. Solun immediately confirmed that everything in the house was being monitored by someone secretly. Perhaps, it is the so-called ghost species. However, even after discovering this, Solun's face did not show the slightest abnormality. For him, although he is not sure what the concept of weird in the room is, looking at the expressions of the two bald heads, it must be a dangerous existence. But this does not mean that the weird would be more deadly to Solun than the two bald heads. Is even good news. Want to survive in the hands of a bald head, this weird may also be one of the conditions that can be used. After listening to the reports from his subordinates, the bald Ivan asked again, how effective are those people? It's not too strong. They use cold weapons, and muskets can easily smash their bodies. Marcus apparently had lingering fears, swallowed, and said, but there are too many dolls, and they can't be killed at all. Even if only one broken arm is left after being bombarded by a musket, they can chase and slash people. And, there are dolls everywhere in the house, they will appear in any corner, in the cabinet, in the door, in the cellar. Can it be smashed with a musket? That's it. Bald Ivan listened carefully to the subordinate's narration, and felt a little emboldened in his heart. He analyzed, it seems that the ability of the ghost species is to control the puppet killing. It should be only the first order weird. Otherwise, if it has the second order strength, it will not be so troublesome to kill you, then. Previously, it was estimated that this cursed space was Alavel and High-Evel, at most it was Blevel. Solun on the side heard the analysis of the bald head, his eyes rolled, but he didn't quite agree with this statement in his heart. Judging from his experience of watching more than 1,000 horror movies, all the actions of that ghost species give him the feeling of, oh, I don't kill you, just play. Killing is more like a game. Obviously, there are only two choices before the bald head. Either leave this weird manor immediately, or continue to search for the Sir Isaac's relic. But no matter how you choose, Bachin will directly face the strangeness of the ghost species in this room. If that weird ability is just to manipulate puppets, it is not a big threat to the bald Ivan. At least, a puppet of that level is not fatal in his eyes. The best ending is that treasures can be taken, weird can also be killed. But if the ability of the ghost species is more than that, even if you don't go hunting for treasures and run away, you will also have to face it. As the head of the waste hunting team who has been licking blood for many years, Ivan barely hesitated and said directly, go. Let's go and see what's weird about this manor. As a living map, Solun naturally wanted to take away. As he said, the bald head turned his head to look at his subordinates, and said, Marcus, you are optimistic about this kid. If there is a slight change, kill him immediately. Marcus glanced at Solun beside him, and said, "Yes, head." Solun didn't have many surprises about this bald head's plan to continue to make choices, and he would do the same for him. But to his surprise, before going out, this bald head actually showed an incredible supernatural ability. Originally, Solun thought it was amazing that the bald head had a steam manipulator, but at that time, he didn't want the bald head to give a soft voice, curse implantation resolution. But seeing that his hands had changed a few hands, he spoke a few unintelligible spells very quickly. Is this strange behavior like jumping a great god, but it caused a miraculous qualitative change. As soon as the spell fell, the house suddenly flourished. I fixed my eyes, and suddenly a golden six-pointed star magic circle appeared at the feet of the brawny man. The lines on the formation are mysterious and complex, as if there is a magical power, which makes people suddenly see the depth of the endless void, and a strong mysterious atmosphere spreads over the surface. Magic! Seeing this scene, Solun blinked and became more surprised. And the more weird ones are still to come. After the light of the magic circle disappeared, on the bare skin of this brawny man, the lines that Solun thought were painted tattoos slowly condensed into real objects. If you look at it again, it has become a layer of shiny metallic scales. After the ceremony, the metal scale armor covered his body, and the bald man's temperament suddenly changed, becoming a majestic steel armor giant. When Marcus saw this, he seemed to have confidence in his heart, and said with a somewhat flattering tone, "No matter how many times I have seen it, the alchemy planting outfit diamond scale armor of the head is still so shocking." "Okay." The bald head nodded, without saying much. The urn sounded and said, "Follow me." Said, he opened the door and walked out without fear. Solun saw this scene in front of him, and his heart became more and more interested. He looked very carefully. The metal scales were made from the tattoos on the bald head after the magic circle appeared. Obviously, this is another extraordinary power beyond Solun's cognition. Before he had time to think about it, the pull from the rope made him jump forward and almost fell. The moment one foot stepped out of the door, Solun suddenly thought of something. He stopped avoiding, but turned his face to look straight at the nutcracker in the corner, and then smiled at it. "Means, I found you. Now that I found it, let's trigger it." According to his years of experience in playing horror games, triggering certain specific conditions may trigger some unexpected plots. Although most of the time this behavior is death, but anyway, the situation can't get worse right now, can it? In a blink of an eye, the three of Solun have already walked out the door. No one had seen it at this time. The jaw of the nutcracker doll was trembling, making strange noises of click and click, as if grinning happily. "Boy, go ahead." Compared to that bald-headed cautious, Marcus's cripple, Solun looked much calmer. He is also very self-aware. Although his fighting and marksmanship were good in his previous life, in this fantasy world of physical resistance to bullets, he is also at the level of the Fighting 5 scum. If you want to live, using your brain is definitely more real than doing it. He was by a rope and walked in the forefront as a shield. But this is also just right. Solun can carefully observe everything in this corridor. As he had expected, this is a luxurious manor. There are bright lights in the corridor, but instead of electric or gas lamps, there are shining gems in the glass lampshade. There are many closed doors on both sides of the corridor, soft cashmere carpets on the floor, and exquisite oil paintings on the walls. But the corridor seems a bit too long. After walking for a while, without seeing his head, the Marcus asked in a trembling voice, "Head, where are we going? We seem to be trapped." Bald Ivan pondered for a moment, and seemed to have noticed the abnormality of this house, and asked, "Boy, where is the room you mentioned?" Solun looked around and said directly, "I have never been here. However, to find the room on the treasure map, you must first find the banquet hall." In fact, he had discovered it a long time ago. No matter how big the manor is, the corridor length is a bit abnormal. But I didn't have time to say more. At this moment, I heard a strange laughter from the old lady who made goosebumps all over my ears. GG, according to the rules of the game, if you are found, you will be killed. This is not like a sound that human voice can make, it makes people whisper like a devil in a low voice, which makes the soul tremble. As soon as he heard this, Marcus turned pale in fright, as if he had received a great shock, and hurriedly said, "It's here, it's here." Every time he heard this sound, his companion was killed. At this moment, Marcus was on the verge of collapse, shaking all over. Solon scanned everything in the corridor, quietly leaned against the wall, and became extra careful. Bald Ivan snorted coldly, "Hey, pretend to be a ghost." At this moment, suddenly a few figures float in the distance. I fixed my eyes, but there were a few weird puppets floating in the air. Their shapes are very simple, like a piece of lotus root spliced together. However, each with a slender sharp knife screwed in his hand, and the lower jaws bite at high frequency, making a dense click and click sound, and the scalp of the person who listened to it was numb. "This is the murder puppet in the manner that the guy said? Can it fly?" Surin's eyelids twitched as he watched these dolls pouring in from both sides of the corridor. Just then, I suddenly heard a muffled sound. No need to look, just by listening to the air waves that almost made people stand unstable, I knew that it was Bald Ivan who fired the cannon. The artillery blasted directly into the pile of puppets tens of meters away, and then smashing the oncoming puppets. But, this didn't stop the puppets from killing like a tide. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Those puppets with broken arms and legs continued to rush over with a bunch of parts. Humph! Bald Ivan burst into the pile of puppets without fear. His metal scale armor also played a huge role at this moment. The swords of those dolls slashed up, Kang Cheo burst into flames, but it didn't hurt him at all. This bald head is really strong. However, those dolls can't be killed at all. If they don't break the game, they will die here sooner or later. Surin's hands were tied, and there was not much room to move. Under the offensive of this doll's tide, the chance of survival was extremely low. However, he didn't plan to catch it with his hands. At this moment, that Marcus was so scared that the hand holding the gun was already trembling, and he had already put down the rope that trapped Sullen. And most of the dolls are restrained by their bald heads. Right now. Solon looked at the surrounding environment, kicked on the ground with one leg without hesitation, and then slammed into the glass window on the side of the corridor. He had observed that there was fog outside the window. Although he didn't know which floor the corridor was on, it was definitely not a high-rise building from the perspective of the structure. The probability of falling to death is unlikely. But this is the jump, and there is another moth. Dang, the glass window was easily smashed by Solon, and the whole person flew out and fell into the thick fog. Where he thought he would fall into the garden or something, he also made a buffer posture for falling from a high altitude. I didn't think about it, but when I landed, I stepped on the soft carpet again. Looking at the familiar surroundings again, Solon was also stunned. Fuck! Am I back again? The brightly lit corridors gave rise to a sense of familiarity. The sound of fighting next to his ear is endless, and then I look at the bald head covered in metal scales. Isn't this the corridor just now? I am back again. Surin's eyelids twitched. Did I bump out of a flash of glass, and then bumped back from another one? Looked back again, and the glass that had been smashed before was restored as before. If it weren't for the on the ground, he would have thought he had experienced an illusion. There is also a problem with the space of this manner. Illusory space? Or is it the ability of the ghost seed? Solon felt the world weird more and more, but quickly realized, sure enough, if you can escape through the windows so easily, those guys before will not be killed by these weird dolls. It was this jump, and Solon fell back into the corridor again and crashed into the pile of dolls. It's good this time, the sheep is in the mouth. Don't look at the dolls that do little harm to bald heads, but for ordinary people like Solun, it is absolutely fatal. Originally, Solun was already lying flat and was not ready to struggle, but to his surprise, these dolls seemed to ignore him, just floated over, and slowed towards the bald head. Hey, they didn't attack me. Solun looked at the doll floating in front of him, with a kind of surprise after the disaster, and secretly speculated, could it be that the reason for the surveillance was discovered before? He faintly guessed that these dolls did not kill him, perhaps because the ghost species felt that there was a fun toy, and he was reluctant to kill him so quickly. This is very painful. At this moment, without warning, I suddenly heard a burst of click and click fractures. Looking intently again, the joints of that Marcus were broken in reverse. Is like a marionette, he was hung in the air by invisible silk threads, his head drooping weakly. Marcus, it's dead. After this guy died, the sword-wielding dolls didn't continue to besie the bald Ivan, but they also faded away like a tide and disappeared at the end of the corridor. Not far away, bald-headed Ivan watched his subordinates die tragically without warning. He was obviously dazed and cursed, damn it. There was no puppet beside Marcus, how did he die? He suddenly realized that this ghost species method is probably not just to manipulate puppets. The bald head naturally noticed Solun, who was let off by the puppet before, and guessed what he might know. But there was no time to ask, and at this moment, a closed door suddenly opened not far away. And at this time, a gentle old man in a tuxedo walked out of the door, and said in an unfeeling tone, "My host invites both of you to the banquet hall for dinner." "Master, meal?" Solun raised his brows when he heard it, and it was not a good thing to look at it. At the same time he heard this, his eyes also looked at the old man who looked like a housekeeper. He found that the guy's eyeballs hadn't been turned all the way when he was talking, and when he took a closer look, his complexion also had a waxy glow. Obviously, this housekeeper is not a living person either. Solun remained calm. The point is that he wants to be sensual, and he can't beat him. Can Ivana with a bald head hold his temper? Just killed a brother in my group in front of Lao Tzu, now invite you to dinner? Go to your mother. Bald cursed, raising his hand is a bombardment. Boom Butler was beaten to pieces by a single shot. And at this moment, the low voice suddenly rang again, and he said sadly, "If you don't follow the rules of the game, you will be killed." Humph! Bald head snorted coldly, still somewhat disapproving. But suddenly, without warning, his whole body stiffened. Is exactly the same as when Marcus died before. So Solun not far away saw clearly this time, and the bald head was by the crystal silk thread like a fishing line, making him unable to move at all. And as the silk thread tightened, the metal scales on the surface of the bald head's skin shattered, and the silk thread was pulled directly into the flesh, overflowing with scarlet blood. Surin watched his eyelids jump. What a weird method. Obviously, that weird strength is far beyond imagination. Seeing that in the next second, Ivan was about to be dismembered into 7 or 8 pieces, and just 1 second before his body fell apart, the bald head was a little bit hard before he screamed, "Wait, I am willing to go." In this way, Solun and the bald Ivan were invited into the banquet hall by the butler who had smashed half of his body. The decoration here is also extremely luxurious, with soothing music playing on the phonograph. There are a lot of people on the table, it looks very lively, and the dining atmosphere seems to be quite harmonious. Solun was seated in an empty seat by the guide of the maid doll. He glanced at the people on the table, and he also had counts in his heart. Although these people are sitting in their own positions, their faces are expressionless and their bodies stiff. There is obviously no living person. Is not a puppet, or a corpse fixed on the seat with silk thread, looks very eerie and weird. However, Solun wasn't surprised. Naturally, he wouldn't think that this ghost species would be so kind to invite them to dinner. Looking at the bald head eating the expression like a fly, he probably knows these corpses. The two were seated in the empty seats, and the dolls in the maid outfit behind them wrapped napkins around them, and then opened the dinner plate covered with a silver lid in front of them. When Solun was seated, he smelled a strong smell of blood, and faintly guessed something. When the lid of the meal is opened, the smell is even more overwhelming. There was a reddish-brown liver on the dinner plate in front of him. It was still breathing slightly, and it looked like it had just been taken off the living body. There are probably no living animals in this manner, so you can guess what liver it is with your feet. Solun raised his eyebrows, not many surprises. In this weird manner, it would be strange if it was normal food. He has played a lot of perverted horror games, this kind of plot, not too out of the ordinary. After a glimpse, his game is pretty good. In front of the bald head was a skinned human head. The eyeballs with nerves are placed in a small dish, which seems to be a dessert after a meal. Looking at the green hair aside, this head seems to be an old acquaintance, the coxcomb head that was killed by Solun in the study before. At this time, the lingering voice sounded again, the rule of the game is, you must finish eating. Otherwise, you will die. At this moment, a table, whether it is a doll or a corpse person, turned his head and stared at the two living people on the table with their hollow eyes. The butler beside also urged with a full warning tone, "Why, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com to distinguished guests, is the food not the appetite of the distinguished guests?" Solun and Bald must have no plans to take the initiative to eat the things on the plate. But obviously, whether to eat or not, they said nothing. At this time, a single transparent silk thread has quietly fallen from the beam of the room, and is tied to the limbs of the two. Solun was aware of it, but he didn't feel any abnormalities in his body. The bald head on the side of was obviously aware of what had happened, his face turned ugly, and he was muttering something desperately, the physical control of the mental system, at least the golden class ghost species, this is all over. He had already experienced the power of this thread just now. He thought it was purely controlled by the physics department, so he thought that he might have some power to find opportunities. But he didn't think about it. Sitting in this chair, he confirmed that the ghost species is also good at mind control. This is the ability to easily kill him. Solun's ears tipped, and he heard what he was muttering in his bald mouth. Soon, he also understood the meaning of body control. At this time, he found that his hands were raised uncontrollably, and then picked up the knife and fork next to the dinner plate, cut up the liver from the plate, and behaved elegantly and gentlemanly. This feeling is very strange. It is not a simple marionette. It seems that the brain has lost control of the body. He can only watch his hands and cut the meat from the plate uncontrollably. One knife, a plate of blood. The bald head not far away has swallowed a popping eyeball, crunchy. The sound of chewing is particularly permeating in this quiet banquet hall. Solun's eyes gradually became a little serious. Because he also picked up the fork with his own hand, he picked up a large piece of meat and sent it to his mouth. If he doesn't want to think of a solution, he will probably taste the taste of human organs for the first time. He knew that if he didn't find a breaking point, he would be killed by the ghost seed sooner or later. A terrifying manner, a weird doll, a ghost species who likes to torture and kill humans. Solun's thoughts turned quickly. Suddenly, he thought of something, and his inspiration flashed, since the weirdness in this room has the ability to easily kill us, but it does not, this shows that the weirdness is wise and not low. Monsters are wise, which is a good thing for him. I'm afraid that monsters only know instinctively, and that is desperate. Fight, it must be impossible to fight. But from his experience in thousands of horror games and horror movies, as long as he is a wise NPC, he can get a plot turn, clue, through conversation. The study, the corridor, the banquet hall, the clues in the brain suddenly connected end to end. Solun felt that he probably found the key to breaking the game. Hey! Exhaled in his heart. Surin decided to give it a try. At this time, his expression suddenly shrank, and he said something inexplicable toward the void. "Miss Pestoya, can I talk to you?" This opening seems to be forbidden by time. Solun himself was delivering meat with his right hand to his mouth, and stopped in midair. Hearing this, the bald head who was eating a mouthful of blood not far away was obviously taken aback, not understanding why Solun suddenly said such inexplicable words. However, at this time, there was a response from the void. "Hey, how do you know my name?" Is still the low and weird old lady's voice before. You guessed it. When Solun heard this, he immediately realized that there was nothing wrong with his reasoning. The Marcus guy said before that this ghost species found them, but didn't kill them directly. Instead, they played a few games, hide and seek, pinball, bowling. As long as you follow the rules of the game, you can live for a while. If you violate the rules, you will be killed immediately. Same as the current situation, this word can easily kill them, but he chose to play. This also proves that the age of this ghost species is not too old, in other words, the psychological age is not too old. And besides the corpse, there are only 3 dolls on this table, a gentleman in a suit, a lady, and a young woman. The gentleman sits in the main seat, obviously this is a family of 3. But when Solun went to the table to observe before, he felt that these 3 people were familiar. If you think about it again, you will remember that he had seen a family portrait on the wall of the study before. In the photo, these 3 people are listed impressively. And in that photo, there is actually a 4th person. A little girl holding a little bear doll. Then, the rest is not difficult to guess. The butler calls it the master and likes pranks, so the identity of this ghost species is only that little girl. And under that photo, there was just a name, Pestia Isaac. Solun did not answer that question, but directly said, "Can I chat with you?" Although he doesn't know what the ghost species is weird, it is probably similar to the ghost in his impression. And, since she knows that she is not old in her heart, then there is more room to talk, flicker. So, first of all, it has to arouse its interest. He said again, "I can tell interesting stories, dance, sing, shadow puppets, puppet shows. I think Miss Pestoya will like." After speaking, the room was silent for a long while. Solun thought that things were still on the verge of fire, but at this moment, the surrounding scene suddenly changed, from the banquet hall to a beautifully decorated girl's bedroom. On the workbench by the window, sits a little girl in a princess dress who is tinkering with some doll parts. She seems to be seriously assembling a doll full of runes. Listening to the movement, she did not look back, and said directly, "You haven't said yet, how do you know my name?" Very gentle girly voice, it sounds crisp and waxy. The first step is done. Successfully aroused its interest. Solun quickly observed everything in the house, and said, "I saw your name on the photo when I was in the study." He spoke as calmly as possible, fearing to provoke him. Because he knows that this little girl who looks harmless to humans and animals in front of him has a distorted psychology that has the evil interest in torturing and killing human beings. The little girl asked again, "In the study before, how did you find me?" Apparently, she was talking about the nutcracker. Solun thought this was a good sign, at least she took the initiative to speak, and responded, "Because I found that the doll's eyes moved." "Oh, that's how it is." The little girl heard this and slowly put down the rune doll in her hand. As if time stood still for a moment, then she slowly turned around. Seeing this, Solun's pupils and eyes were slightly narrowed, faintly feeling that there will be a big turn in the plot. Just in case, he silently replenishes himself with a special BGM for watching horror movies. Today is a good day. As expected. In the next moment, the little girl turned her face to Solun, suddenly changed back to the low and terrifying voice before, and asked sadly, "Now, do you still want to chat with me?" This is a burnt face, the facial features are all wrinkled together by the high temperature, and there are only 3 holes in the mouth and nose. Normal people will be shocked when they see this face suddenly. What surprised the little girl was that Solun's expression never changed at all, no panic, no resentment, no fear, even. He stared at the little girl's face seriously, with a gentle smile on his face. If you have watched 1,000 horror movies, it is probably hard to be scared. In horror movies, there are not 100 kinds of plots of let's kill, there are 80 kinds: sulfuric acid, fire, split, abscess, all kinds of horrible and disgusting scenes. Therefore, when Solun saw this burnt face, his heart was not very disturbed. He knew that if he had been frightened or had an expression of fear just now, it might trigger an instant death effect, and he would definitely not be able to talk about it this day. However, he passed the first hurdle smoothly. Surin went directly to the subject. Of course, Miss Pistoia. I can feel your loneliness. He imitated the tone of the psychologist who treated him and started a conversation. The little girl was stunned, as if she hadn't thought about what she should do if the other party was not frightened by her terrifying appearance. Solun didn't give her a chance to make trouble, and immediately began to tell her own story. When I was in the juvenile school, I was often confined. Oh, the juvenile school is a place for disobedient children. So, the kind of loneliness I can experience when a person is locked in a hut. I was born in a very warm family, but my parents left when I was very young. If you have read 800 books, you won't think there is anything new in this world. Italian Carlo Gazzi said that there are only 36 plots in the world: appeal, rescue, revenge, revenge between flesh and blood, hunting, disaster, misfortune, reassurance, seeking. Sullen saw the face of Pistoia and immediately speculated a lot of plot. Burns? Was either an accident or a murder. There is also a family in the restaurant that is made into puppets and sits neatly there, either missing or resentful. From the limited clues, this should be a harmonious family. Pistoia should have been born in a loving motherly family, and then when she was about 10 years old, she was killed by an accidental fire. Life is also fixed in that year. Solun is not all flicker, but can really experience that kind of loneliness. Because he is telling his own story. Perhaps, only people with mental illness can understand mental illness. He has been in the juvenile management office for so many years of psychological counseling, and after reading so many psychology books, the psychological communication methods of problem children are simply readily available. Although this word is very powerful, its supernatural ability can even easily kill 100 Solun. But after all, the psychological age is just a little girl who has not been deeply involved in the world. With wisdom, there are emotional needs. This is what the psychiatrist said when he treated himself. The desire to survive overwhelmed the guilt of the little girl in Solun's heart, and the two slowly began to chat. My name is Surin, and I am glad to meet you, Miss Pistoia. Are you really afraid of me? Well, I can see that Pistoia is a kind girl. No, I killed a lot of people. I have also killed many people. When I was 12 years old, a group of hooligans insulted and killed my neighbor's sister. Then I took a knife and chased them 3 streets, stabbing them one by one. The murderer, it doesn't have to be the wicked, the ones who were killed, maybe they deserve to die. Solun saw a touch of curiosity from that burnt face, as if he had found a sense of identity in his words. After a pause, he did not forget to give some psychological hint, and then said, later in the juvenile management office, my doctor told me that bad people should be punished, but good people cannot be hurt. Oh! Pistoia murmured seemingly. Groaned for a moment, she asked softly, what do you think is a good person? Solun, personally, the difference between good people and bad people lies in whether they conform to their own values. At least until today, I think those guys deserve to die. Pistoia is very clever, apparently meeting Solun's meaning. She has a sly look in her eyes, and asks, are you a good person then? Solun did not blush, of course. Glug. Hearing this, the room resounded like a silver bell of laughter. The atmosphere suddenly became less rigid. Girls are probably beauty-loving. The little girl has restored her appearance in the photo. She is blonde, cute, and well-behaved. Solun told his own story. The lonely experience of the two mentally ill patients made it easy for them to find resonance. Not long after, sitting side by side like good friends alone, Solun told her some weird stories on Earth. Pistoia will also talk about what happened in the manor. My parents are very good alchemists. They are very busy every day. Only these puppets will stay with me, but unfortunately they can't speak. Surin didn't ask about the fire, he could guess it with his toes, which would definitely trigger Pistoia's painful memory. The two chatted about fun and interesting trivial things. The plot also unfolded in the direction he expected. Solun's purpose is to survive. Obviously, he probably won't be killed. But, there seems to be something more. Resonance is always mutual. Although there is no favorability panel in the game, Solun feels that this little girl can talk to him quite well. The two chatted for a long time, and Pistoia seemed very satisfied, with a lovely smile on her face. Thank you, no one has spoken to me for many years. The little girl thought of something and said, but you can't stay by my side for too long, otherwise, you will be distorted. Distortion. Surin felt that it would be okay to stay a while longer, but after hearing Pistoia's words, he also realized that there might be other dangers in this space. At this time, Pistoia seemed to think of something again. She walked to her workbench, took the finished rune doll, put it in a beautiful box, and said, "This is a parting gift for you, Mr. Solun. Thank you for telling me with me." That's the case. Upon hearing this, Solun knew that he had survived successfully. Solun is not polite, and took the wooden box with the rune doll. A simple doll with yellow skin and a heavy hand. It looks like there are many metal parts inside, and the most peculiar thing is that it has looming blue runes on its surface. He didn't ask much, but smiled slightly, and said, "Thank you for your gift too, Miss Pistoia. Mr. Solun, we probably won't see you in the future. Even if you come next time, I might have forgotten you. It's going to be parting," and Pistoia's face is sad. Then, she took off a butterfly brooch from her dress and pinned it on Solun's chest with her own hands. "This is my favorite brooch. It was a birthday gift from my mother when I was 6 years old. It was also from me. I hope you can do me a favor after you go out." Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Solun readily agreed, "Okay. If you can see my parents in the future, help me ask." Pistoia said here, but she stopped suddenly and did not continue. Solun was puzzled, "Ask what?" Pistoia's tone suddenly became painful, and the scary old woman's voice alternated with the girl's voice, "Ask them, why did they burn me to death?" As soon as these words came out, an inexplicable chill suddenly swept the whole room. Ah! Solun never expected that she would suddenly say such a sentence. He immediately realized that the truth of the matter is not that simple. It turns out that Pistoia was burned to death by her parents? How could it be possible that in a harmonious and loving family, parents burned their favorite little daughter to death? Where is the problem? Is Pistoia having a problem, or is it a problem with her parents? However, it was too late to think about it. At this moment, Pistoia seemed to be touched by a demon in the bottom of her heart. There was a black mist on her body, and she was about to run away. Seeing this scene, Solun decisively stretched out his hand and gently touched her head. Probably because of enough goodwill, Pistoia suddenly fell silent with comfort. She slowly raised her head, and her eyes full of red light gradually returned to calm. Solun nodded solemnly, "Okay. I promise you." It turned out that she had also bravely loved the world, but the world gave her endless pain. "Goodbye." Pistoia grinned at him, her eyes as clear as the starry sky, still so innocent and cute. "I am also very happy to meet you, Mr. Solun." Say goodbye to a friend who has only known each other for a few hours, but probably never see each other again. Solun felt a little down. The surrounding scenery suddenly changed, from that luxurious manor house to a ruin. This is the remains of the previous manor. Although all the decorations in the house are decayed, judging from the uncollapsed frame structure of the house, this is the manor where he stayed before. The banquet hall, corridor, study, the layout is very familiar. It will take hundreds of years at least to decay like this. Solun felt a little weird. He felt that he was already very prepared, but seeing the dilapidated scene in front of him, he still felt that his mind was a little too difficult to turn around. Could it be that the mansion before was an illusion, and the Pestoya, bald head, and others encountered were all illusions? But he looked down and saw that he was holding a wooden box in his hand, which was the box containing the rune doll. And his chest is also wearing the butterfly brooch decorated with black gems. Things are real. Solun stroked the box in his hand. There was a feeling of waking up from a dream and then bringing the dream back to reality. Is the brightly lit manor just now a special space like a game copy? Solun looked around, but couldn't figure it out. His knowledge of the world is too limited, and many problems cannot be understood by thinking. However, now he faces another question: where should he go now? And for the first time, he thought of the information on the retina. The original owner came here to find some Sir Isaac's relic. After leisure, Solun has time to carefully look at the obscure information on the retina. He also realized that the treasure that the original owner came to look for seemed very difficult. Just right, he is also very interested in that kind of extraordinary ability. After thinking about it, Solun decided to check it out first. He also speculated that there should be no other dangers in this manor. If so, Pestoya should also be the biggest boss. Based on his impression, Solun found the banquet hall of the mansion. Then counted along the left hand and found the 7th room. The door of the room was completely decayed, and there were spider webs everywhere, which looked very gloomy. But the structure of the house is fairly stable, except for the mottled paint on the wall. It can be generally recognized as a storage room. Solun walked in cautiously, except for occasionally hearing a few squeaks of mice. There were no scary monsters that would appear in horror movies. He glanced at the furnishings in the room and saw the hexagonal lampstand on the wall. I found the correct lamp, twisted it clockwise, and heard a click and click gears, and a hidden door appeared. It's been hundreds of years, this mechanism can still function normally. Solun appeared in the deep passage before his eyes, slightly surprised. Didn't hesitate much, and walked in. The passage is probably isolated from the outside air, and the preservation is very complete. I tried a little bit, and it was not stuffy, and I could breathe normally. The corridor is made of blue bricks, and a wall lamp is hung on the wall at intervals. Although the light of the topaz, which is not known for its material, is very weak, it is enough to illuminate the entire secret passage. Solun didn't dare to touch anything. Since the secret door could be opened normally, 80% of the mechanisms in the secret tunnel could still function normally. The information on the retina has a special warning: do not touch anything outside of the safe line. Just like that, not long after he left, Solun found that the corridors around him had become a little weird, as if they were exactly the same everywhere. He knew that this was entering the maze. There are visual interference mechanisms here. Carved some necessary direction marks with stones on the ground, and he continued forward. After the first fork in the road, left, right, up, down. Fortunately, the correct way to move the maze was left on the retina, and Solun did not encounter any trouble along the way. After about a quarter of an hour, he arrived at his destination, a spacious closed stone room. There are that kind of huge luminous gems here, which illuminate the whole house. Is this the great hermit altar marked by the treasure map? Solun didn't step into the stone room in a hurry, but took a closer look. The center of the round stone room is surrounded by 5 tall stone statues. It was dressed in a cloak, covering the whole body and most of its face, and looked very mysterious. If you close your eyes carefully, you will find that 3 of the statues have cracks, and only 2 are intact. And behind the cloak of each statue is engraved with a special symbol. Seems to be a special code name. What surprised Solun was that just looking at these statues, a feeling of sacred majesty rushed over his face, making people feel like they wanted to worship. That kind of feeling, as if being watched by a god, makes people instantly feel as small as dust. It's really a peculiar statue. Solun looked at this scene, feeling a bit in his heart. Has unveiled the veil of the world, and is exposing its mystery a little bit before his eyes, making Solun's desire to discover more and more intense. There is nothing superfluous in the secret room. The 5 statues stand on one side, and the center of their faces is a circular altar with a diameter of about 5 meters. The altar is carved with an 8-pointed star magic circle, surrounded by special characters and runes that are not understandable, and there is an inscribed pattern of Ouroboros and balance in the center. This altar hides the secret of the way to obtain the bald head's talent with hard bones and bullet resistance. Solun looked at the carved lines on the altar, and a deep thought appeared on his face. There is still this passage on the retina, "My dear Fick, I'm sorry, you have lost everything. Through deciphering and deciphering, I found an amazing secret from the mysterious Isaac alchemy manuscripts I got from the family. Extraordinary talents can be awakened naturally and passed on by blood. In fact, there is a third way, which is to use specific conditions to direct awakening. Although it is only an unproven treasure map, this is the best way I can think of to compensate you." Solun didn't think about this passage. The cause and effect are no longer important. He captured several important keywords: sacrifice medium, directional awakening, talent. Says that after Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com sacrifice his own eyeballs, he may obtain a very powerful level talent ability. An extremely rare ability that everyone in the world of alchemy dreams of. If it were on the earth, Solun would definitely take it as a joke when he saw this. Dig out one's own eyeballs to sacrifice and gain superpowers? Go to your sister's superpowers. But after seeing so many extraordinary powers just now, Solun thought about this issue very carefully. As for the word possible, it also has the element of gambling. Because no one has tried it. I remember that Baldhead said that his hard bullet resistant ability was called C079 Steeled Bone? S grade, it seems to be more powerful. Solun waited in his mind for a moment, wondering how the talent ratings in this world were different. But if you can get the extraordinary power like a bald head, it seems to be worth the price. There are already certain ideas in his heart that are already eager to try. Besides, there is another reason that made Solun make up his mind. He also thought that the background of the original owner did not look simple, and the big man who left a message on his retina would recognize in honorifics that the altar specifications were extremely high, and perhaps the talent for awakening here would be stronger than the tempered bones. Opportunity, no matter which world it is in, there is always an element of gambling in it. The worst result is blindness and nothing. Solun, who has just experienced the battle of life and death, feels that this does not seem to be an unacceptable price. If you want to get it, you have to pay. This is a basic rule that all worlds follow. Thinking of this, he raised his eyebrows and comforted himself, "It's all here, try it." Solun made a decision and walked onto the altar with a calm expression on his face. Hesitation has never been his character. From the time he planned to find the route to follow, he had actually planned. Coming to such an interesting fantasy world, still fearful of the beginning and end, it is really boring. Solun stood on the altar, stepped on the intricately carved runes under his feet, and observed carefully. He had seen Baldhead use this alchemy formation before, and that guy used a 6-pointed star magic array to create a metal scale armor. But obviously, the formation engraved on this altar is much more complicated. The blood is soaked in Ouroboros, the formation opens. Following the prompt of the information on the retina, he tore off the wound that was simply bandaged on his palm. Then he squeezed it slightly, and after the wound was torn apart, the blood stayed between his fingers and dripped onto the Ouroboros carving of the magic circle. Ouroboros was soaked with blood, and the blood color spread from the animation. The body of a stone-carved snake gradually became red and shiny like a ruby. In a blink of an eye, the runes on this altar were all lit up, and the golden light was so strong that people almost couldn't open their eyes. The formation works normally. Solun muttered to himself, slightly joyful. This is a good phenomenon. The formation can work, which means that the method of deciphering in the Isaac alchemy manuscript has a high probability of being correct. After all, probably no one would make such a complicated prank. The formation method lights up, and the next step is the sacrifice link. The information narrated on the retina: all alchemy in this world obeys the principle of equivalent exchange. To get that kind of talent, you have to sacrifice an equivalent price. What he has to pay now is his own eyeball. Hey! Solun slowly exhaled, and slowly raised his right hand, digging towards his left eye, and sneered in his heart, sure enough, the body is very excited about suffering from pain. Even if it is digging. My own eyes. Eye picking is a bit for others, but it is not unfamiliar to Solun. In his first year in the juvenile prison, when he became ill, he did just that. The object was a prison tyrant who bullied him. After that, the inmates called him lunatic. Later, when he was familiar with human anatomy at the junior management office, he knew how to kill, wound, and hit accurately and accurately. Fear stems from the unknown. Solun knows exactly what he will face when he picks his eyes, so he feels calm in his heart. He did not hesitate to stop, as if he was not the one who suffered the pain. Tingling, piercing tingling. There is also the fear of blindness in one eye. The blood dripped from the eye sockets and landed on the altar. Solun's forehead was covered with cold sweat, and his face was scary white. After taking a few breaths, he took the scarlet object and placed it in the hanging basket on the left side of the stone carving of balance. At this moment, as if a certain condition was activated, the balance in the center of the altar suddenly emitted a dazzling red light, swallowing that eyeball. At this moment, the stone sculpture with the symbol. Among the 5 stone sculptures beside the altar also haunted a layer of aura, a ray of green aura like a small snake, quietly poured into Surun's bleeding left eye. This is a very complicated alchemical conversion ritual. This dusty altar with high specifications for thousands of years, at this moment, under the urge of the media, it seems that different time and space are connected. An ancient and majestic atmosphere descended in this secret room. Solun didn't notice it, but his limited perception also made him touch a little bit of the mystery of this magical alchemy. It seemed to travel in the endless starry sky, and then smoothly picked a bright star from the starry sky and blended it into the body. The process went smoother than expected, and nothing happened that could be called an accident. Solun didn't know what happened, his eyes were full of blood. Soon, he clearly felt that the pain in his eyes was disappearing, and the light in his left eye was recovering. Success! Solun probably guessed something, and suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. That crisp and itchy sensation is a phenomenon of muscle tissue regeneration, which is incredibly fast. The whole process lasted about 3 minutes, and the red light of the magic circle on the altar was completely dimmed. The moment the red light dissipated, the statue with the symbol also clicked a gap. Solun's left eye slowly focused, clear and shining, like a newborn baby. Looking closely, there is a silver moon in the golden pupils. The luster flashed, and the moon shadow disappeared in the depths of his pupils. This is a very wonderful experience. It is obviously the same altar before, but it looks like a strange new world at the moment. All objects become extremely clear, just like the original high-definition photo with the filter turned off, and it is visible. Even the dense cobweb-like gaps on the statue are clearly identifiable. So, what supernatural ability did I awaken? Is it vision enhancement? Confirming that the ceremony has been completed, Solun looked around, then lowered his head to look at his body. There seems to be no change in appearance, but eyesight seems to have improved a lot. Even in low light, the field of vision is extremely clear. If it is only like this, he thinks it is much worse than the bald-tempered bone. But when Solun complained in his heart, a strange feeling appeared. He looked at his body carefully, and after looking at the flowers in the fog for a real gaze, a strange text appeared in his eyes. Surin, Fik Regardi, Dark Spiritual Power Value, 233/1130 Charm, 9 Power, 6 Agility, 6 Physique, 5 Perception, 4 Technique, 8 Mentality, 26 Talent, Talent S018 PUPIL of All-Knowing Skills, Hagam Breathing Method, Elementary Firearms Proficiency, Introduction to Advanced Fighting Comprehensive Evaluation of Combat Effectiveness, B+, for ordinary people who are not on the job. Apart from being handsome, you are very weak in combat effectiveness. But you who have awakened this level talent all-knowing eye, you will have endless possibilities in the future. Seeing here, it seems that time has stopped for a moment. Solun was surprised. Data panel. When he saw this data appearing on the retina, he felt like he was playing the game again. But when he saw the talent S018 PUPIL of all-knowing on the panel, this was abrupt. It turns out that the extraordinary talent of this sacrificial ritual awakening is this ability. It doesn't seem to be very powerful. Solun muttered in his heart, and understood why the sacrifice was his eyeball. It turns out that this directive awakening means this, changing your eyes. Solun's thinking is very jumping, and he will no longer worry about things that cannot be changed, but will complain about the comments on the panel. Can you be able to fight 10 fighting skills on the earth? Is this just an advanced entry? That's all. The 100 STEP piercing yang spear technique that has spent most of the savings in the shooting range is just a junior proficiency? What is the advanced and proficient marksmanship like? Is it possible to turn the bullet? And comprehensive evaluation, weak chicken? Is not very harmful, very insulting. Hee. Compared with that bald head, it really can only be regarded as a weak chicken. Solun gave a wry smile, but he also had some concepts about the combat power system of this world. And that inexplicable Hagam breathing method should be a passive skill learned and mastered by the original owner. Solun felt that there was a strange energy flowing in his body before, and his breathing naturally followed a certain rhythm. It was something like muscle memory, which was almost instinctive. And the dark spiritual power value, I think it should be something similar to the inner family Qigong in the previous life. But he looked at his attribute panel again, revealing a touch of confusion. The other items are okay, but the value of 26 points of mental power is too eye-catching. Is it because of multiple personalities? Shurintug pondered his chin. Yu reading www.yuncha.com hasn't had time to think about it. But at this time, suddenly something unexpected happened. At this moment, the altar whose light had already dissipated was lit up again. This time it was not golden light, but grey mist shrouded in cold light. As if opening a channel to hell, he felt a trembling breath from his soul. What's the matter? The alchemy array is activated again. Solun was very puzzled, because the information on the retina did not record this weird situation that would happen during the ritual. But he did not change, because this scene is very similar to the previous awakening. After the light of the magic circle flashed, the statue with the symbol on the cloak lit up in fluorescence, and a faint black light overflowed from the statue. The conversion process this time is much faster than before. The talent has not been awakened, how can it come again? I haven't sacrificed. Solun looked at this familiar process, and was very puzzled. At the same time, he seemed to feel that something intangible had been taken away from his body, and he felt a lot easier inexplicably. Before long, the light of the 8-pointed star dissipated, and the statue cracked again. Now, none of the 5 statues are intact. Solun also clearly felt that the sense of mystery and awe that these statues gave him before suddenly disappeared, turning into 5 ordinary stone sculptures. Solun looked at the panel again, wanting to know what happened to his body. Then, directly looking at the talent column, there is one more thing: talent S004DEATH Reaper. Dual talents? What is this? Solun lacks a basic understanding of the world, so even if he sees this extra talent, he doesn't know what it is. Moreover, he found that his mental power value had also changed from 26 to 18. I lost 8 points of mental power, and the feeling of chattering in my ears has completely disappeared. Solun speculated in his heart, the principle of this altar is to sacrifice items and exchange them for a certain kind of extraordinary talent. Before, I changed my eyes. Now the mental power is reduced. Could it be, the original owner's insufficiency is in his body? The soul was completely sacrificed, and then a new talent was obtained. He didn't struggle with this issue much, and there is no way to prove it anyway. At this time, Solun had another strange thought in his mind: if he is not a traverser, what sacrifice should a normal person take to obtain this talent, commit suicide on the altar, and then sacrifice his soul? What is the use of this talent S004DEATH Reaper? After all, it's not a game, there is no skill instruction in reality. Solun looked at it for a moment, but still had no idea at all, and there was no increase in his body. He thought for a while, no longer entangled, but continued to test the abilities of his eyes. In a blink of an eye, he turned his gaze to a few stone sculptures, and a string of words appeared on them. Broken stone carving. Detailed explanation: the stone sculpture that has lost its extraordinary power has no meaning for observation. This time, Solun probably knows what this talent is for. Isn't this the appraisal technique in the game? This talent has to talk about the increase in combat power, not to mention that the increase is not big, it can be said to be completely useless. This basic positioning is an auxiliary function. At least, it really fought, and it was not on the same level as the tempered bone with the bald head before. Probably I didn't understand the use of this all-knowing pupil, maybe there are still untapped abilities. Such a complicated awakening ceremony should not be so simple. Solun looked at him, not much disappointed. At least, his eyesight has improved. For his marksmanship, it seems that his head can be more accurate. At this time, he suddenly thought of something, walked down the altar, took out the rune doll that Pistoia gave him before, and identified it. From this look, I found that this is a good baby. Curse object, rune puppet quality, gold description: it doesn't like being manipulated by humans, it likes to control humans. Curse characteristics: within 10 meters, indiscriminate mind control of target creatures whose spirit is lower than 15 is hypnotized, physically confused, crazy. Detailed explanation: Alchemist's mystery system. Cunning puppeteer. Job material: after taking up the job, he has greatly improved his skills and agility. Attributes to comprehend exclusive inheritance skills. Evaluation: the physical fit is 93%. This is already a very good quality professional advancement material. If it weren't for this Eye of Omniscient, Solun would have never expected that any toy doll he used as a souvenir would be so powerful. Body confusion. This seems to be one of Pistoia's extraordinary abilities. He looked at the detailed introduction of the doll, and immediately thought of the scene of his hands and feet eating uncontrollably when he was in the banquet hall. Directly deprived of control of the body, this ability is really evil. It's still undifferentiated mind control. Solun looked at him with a dreadful expression. If he weren't mentally stronger than ordinary people, putting this thing next to him would probably make him go crazy immediately. It's probably equivalent to carrying a dangerous nuclear radiation toy with you. And at this time, he also saw a new vocabulary in the detailed explanation: employment materials. He thought of before the bald Yvonne used the magic circle to change the form of the metal scale armor. Is it some kind of advanced professional special method? Solun has a lot of weird knowledge in his head, and he probably guessed that the so-called inauguration is similar to the job transfer in the game. Pistoia's job is supposed to be a puppeteer. But how should I find a job? Numerous question marks popped up in Solun's mind, and he sighed slightly. His knowledge of the world is too limited, and he lacks a lot of necessary common sense. And now, it seems that the ability to have such an all-knowing pupil is quite practical. At least it can let him see that these magical items are no longer completely confused. Solun put the puppet back into the wooden box. To his surprise, when he fixed his eyes, the puppet box with the rune was actually a treasure. Level rune seal wooden box detailed explanation, a special alchemy box that can block the fluctuations of mental power. If you look closely, you will find some words carved on it. Solun felt that the lines on this box were a bit special before. Now that I saw this hint, I looked closely at it and found that the lines were densely populated with tiny prints. It was a book of a guide to making puppets. Could it be that Pistoia feels that I have a strong spirit and are suitable for being a puppet master? Not only did she send out the inaugural materials, but also the vocational skills books. Solun suddenly thought of the cute little blonde girl, and there was always a lingering regret in his heart. Pity. He did not forget to agree to the girl's agreement and help her ask why his parents burned her to death. But this manor has been abandoned for at least a few hundred years, and his parents probably disappeared long ago. This promise may never be possible. Then, looking again, the butterfly brooch that the little girl pinned on his chest was also an extraordinary item. Pistoia's brooch focus plus 10 detailed explanation, a brooch with strong resentment. Reading www.yunsha.com is an exquisite alchemy product that allows the wearer to learn, cast spells, work, more focused. But long-term wearing, resentment will make people's temperament perverse and violent. Note, your extraordinary ability prevents you from detecting and understanding too many things beyond your cognitive level, so after perceiving carefully, you still see a string of unknown. Solun looked at the brooch, thinking it was the little girl's gift. I didn't think about it, when he saw the sentence. Behind the brooch, a series of question marks also popped up in his heart. A bewildering sense of mystery immediately hit his face. There is something hidden in this brooch that I can't understand temporarily. What is it that will make the all-knowing pupil judge that it can't even understand it? Is it like explaining to a two-dimensional creature the concept of three-dimensional and four-dimensional space, can hear and hear, but just can't understand it? It's certainly not easy to make myself understand something that even a traverser can't understand. Is there any secret hidden in this brooch? Solun felt that something was wrong instinctively. And at this time, the problem that plagued Sullen came to mind again. Why did Pistoia's parents burn her to death? Maybe, she has some kind of problem? In this world with extraordinary abilities, ghosts know that there will be some weird existences. If there is no all-knowing eye, perhaps Solun will not find any problem with the brooch. But now that he found out, he became more wary. But Solun thought about it. Pistoia is the big boss in this manor. Even if there is doubt, it is best not to be here. Thinking about it, he decided to leave here first.